The night was heavy with humidity in Arlington, Virginia, the air clinging to the skin like a damp shroud. Talia Porter sat behind the wheel of her unassuming sedan, her sharp eyes scanning the rearview mirror as headlights flared behind her. Two white police officers, Sullivan and Carter, emerged from their cruiser, their strides oozing arrogance, flashlights slicing through the darkness. They thought they'd snagged an easy target, a black woman alone, ripe for the twisted game. What they didn't know was that Talia wasn't just any woman. She was a CIA operative, a shadow in the world of espionage, and their trap was about to become their undoing. This wasn't a routine traffic stop gone wrong. It was a meticulously laid snare, a corrupt scheme to pin a fabricated drug charge on an innocent woman. But Talia Porter was no ordinary prey. Trained in the art of deception and survival, she faced their accusations with a steely calm, her mind racing to unravel their plot. What began as a quiet drive home spiraled into a high-stakes battle, one that would expose a festering rot within the Arlington police force and bring two rogue cops to their knees. In the end, the courtroom would be their reckoning, and the truth, like a relentless tide, would wash away their lies. The red and blue lights pulsed against Talia's windshield, a silent command to pull over. She complied, her hands steady on the wheel, her breath measured. Sullivan, a stocky man with a perpetual smirk, tapped her window with his flashlight. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am," he drawled, his tone dripping with condescension. Carter, leaner and quieter, lingered behind, his eyes cold and calculating. Talia opened the door slowly, her movements deliberate, giving him no excuse to escalate. She knew their type, cops who thrived on power, who saw her skin as a license to harass. "License and registration," Sullivan barked, his flashlight blinding her momentarily. She handed him over, her voice calm. "What's the problem, officer?" Sullivan's smirk widened. "We'll get to that. Got any contraband in there?" Talia's gaze didn't waver. "No, sir." But they weren't listening. Carter was already circling her car, his flashlight probing the shadows. Then came the signal, a subtle nod between him, and the trap sprang shut. "We've got probable cause," Carter announced, pulling a small baggie from his pocket, its contents a powdery white lie. Talia's pulse quickened, but her face remained a mask. "That's not mine," she said evenly. Sullivan chuckled. "Sure it isn't. Hands behind your back." The cuffs clicked around her wrists, cold steel biting into her skin. They thought they'd won, their smug grins betraying their confidence. But Talia Porter wasn't just a victim, she was a predator in disguise, and she'd already begun to turn the tables. Her CIA training kicked in, a mental checklist unfurling. She noted their badges: Sullivan, number 472, Carter, number 319, the cruiser's license plate, the faint hum of a dashcam she doubted was recording. These weren't random details, they were weapons she'd wield later. As they shoved her into the backseat, she caught a snippet of their conversation. "This'll stick," Carter muttered. "Captain'll love it." Sullivan laughed. Another notch on the belt. Their words were breadcrumbs, and Talia was already piecing together the bigger picture, a conspiracy stretching beyond this lonely road. The precinct was a maze of fluorescent lights and stale coffee, its walls echoing with the clatter of keyboards and the murmur of offices. Talia sat in a holding cell, her wrists still cuffed, her mind a whirlwind of strategy. The charge, possession with intent to distribute, was a heavy one, a felony that could bury her for years. But she wasn't afraid. Fear was a luxury she'd shed long ago, in the deserts of Kandahar and the back alleys of Moscow. She was a CIA field agent, forged in chaos, and this was just another mission. Sullivan swaggered in, his smirk intact. "You're in deep, lady. Better start talking." Talia met his gaze, her voice cutting like a blade. "I've got nothing to say to you." He leaned closer, his breath sour. "Oh, you will. Everyone breaks eventually." She didn't flinch, her silence a wall he couldn't breach. Carter joined him, his eyes narrowing. "We found the stash in your car. It's over." Talia's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. You planted it. We both know that. Their laughter was forced, a crack in their bravado. She filed away. She scanned the cell, cameras in the corners, a guard pacing outside, the faint buzz of a faulty light. Every detail was a potential escape hatch. She wasn't just waiting to be freed, she was plotting. Sullivan and Carter thought they held the reins, but Talia was a master of patience, a chess player moving pieces they couldn't see. She'd bide her time, gather intel, and strike when they least expected it. The precinct wasn't a prison, it was her battlefield. Keller, a rookie cop with wide eyes and a nervous tic, watched from the sidelines. He'd joined the force to uphold justice, not to frame innocence, and something about Talia's arrest gnawed at him. Sullivan and Carter were legends in the precinct, hard-nosed, untouchable, but the glee over this bust felt wrong. She didn't even blink, Keller murmured to himself, replaying her calm defiance. He'd seen guilty suspects panic, lash out, beg. Talia was different, too composed, too sharp. He lingered near her cell, catching snippets of her exchange with the veterans. "You're wasting your time," she'd said, her tone icy. Sullivan's retort, "We've got all the time in the world," rang hollow. Keller's gut twisted. He'd heard rumors about the pair, cases that didn't add up, evidence too convenient. Was this another one? He glanced at the evidence log, the baggie listed as recovered from suspect's vehicle. No witnesses, no body cam footage. It stank of a setup. Keller's conscience wrestled with his loyalty. Confronting Sullivan and Carter meant risking his career, maybe more. But letting an innocent woman, especially one who carried herself like Talia, rot in a cell wasn't justice. He hovered near the desk, pretending to shuffle papers, his mind racing. Talia caught his eye through the bars, her gaze piercing. "You don't belong with him," she said softly, her words a hook sinking into his doubt. He froze, heart pounding. She saw through him, and that terrified him, and intrigued him. Talia wasn't alone. Beyond the precinct's walls, her CIA team was a coiled spring, ready to strike. She'd activated a covert signal during the arrest, a subtle tap on her watch, a frequency only her handler could detect. Now, she waited, her senses attuned to every shift in the precinct's rhythm. Sullivan and Carter strutted like peacocks, oblivious to the storm brewing. "She's going down," Carter boasted to a colleague, his voice carrying. Talia smirked inwardly. They had no idea who they'd caged. Her plan wasn't just escape, it was exposure. She'd turn their arrogance against them, sowing seeds of doubt among their own. Keller was the key. She'd seen the flicker of unease in his eyes, the way he hesitated when Sullivan barked orders. "You ever wonder why they're so sure?" she asked him casually as he passed her cell again. He stopped, frowning. "What do you mean?" She leaned closer, voice low. "No cameras, no witnesses. Just their word. Doesn't that bother you?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. She didn't need him to. The seed was planted. Meanwhile, her team moved in shadows. Agent Reese, her handler, tracked her signal to Arlington, piecing together the arrest's anomalies. A planted baggie, no dashcam, 2 cops with a history of shaky busts, it screamed corruption. Reese alerted the FBI, pulling strings to launch a rapid response investigation. Talia's faith in her team was unshakable. She just had to hold the line until they breached the walls. Keller couldn't sleep. Talia's words echoed in his skull, gnawing at his resolve. He dug through old case files in the precinct's basement, the flickering bulb overhead casting eerie shadows. Sullivan and Carter's names popped up too often, drug busts with thin evidence, suspects who confessed under duress. His stomach churned. Talia was right. This wasn't random. She was a target, and he was complicit if he stayed silent. He typed an email on his personal laptop, hands trembling. "To whom it may concern, officers Sullivan and Carter may be involved in misconduct. Case number 47291, suspect Talia Porter. Evidence questionable." He hesitated, then hit send, routing it to an FBI tip line he'd found online. It was a gamble, a spark that could ignite his career, or save it. He returned to the precinct, his nerves electric, just as the first FBI agents rolled into the parking lot. Sullivan noticed the shift first, his smirk fading. "What's with the suits?" he muttered to Carter, who paled. "Trouble," Carter replied, his voice tight. The precinct buzzed with unease as agents demanded access to logs, body cams, arrest reports. Keller watched from the sidelines, his pulse racing. He'd lit the fuse, and there was no turning back. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, packed with reporters, lawyers, and onlookers hungry for justice or scandal. Talia stood tall, her orange jumpsuit swapped for a crisp blazer, her eyes locked on Sullivan and Carter across the aisle. The FBI's raid had unearthed a goldmine, doctored logs, deleted footage, a trail of bribes linking the duo to a local drug ring. Talia's planted evidence was the tip of a corrupt iceberg, and she'd been the bait to expose it. Her lawyer, a bulldog named Hargrove, tore into the cop's story. No dashcam, no witnesses, a baggie magically appearing. "Gentlemen, this isn't police work. It's a frame job." Sullivan squirmed, his bravado crumbling. Carter stared at the floor, defeated. Talia took the stand, her voice steady as she recounted the arrest, her CIA credentials unveiled to gasps from the gallery. "I'm Agent Talia Porter, Central Intelligence Agency. These officers targeted me to silence an investigation into their racket." Keller testified next, his voice shaky but firm. "I saw the inconsistencies. I couldn't stay quiet." His words sealed their fate. The judge's gavel fell, charges against Talia dismissed, Sullivan and Carter arrested on the spot for corruption, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. The precinct's leadership resigned in disgrace, a domino effect of accountability rippling outward. Talia walked free, the Virginia sun warm on her face. Reese met her outside, a rare smile breaking his stern features. "You're a damn force, Porter." She nodded, exhaustion mingling with triumph. The truth had prevailed, not just for her, but for every victim of Arlington's corrupt underbelly. Keller approached, sheepish but proud. "I'm sorry it took so long," he said. She clasped his shoulder. "You did the right thing. That's what counts." Sullivan and Carter faced decades behind bars, their empire of lies reduced to ashes. The community demanded reform, their voices a chorus Talia had amplified. She'd exposed the rot, but her mission wasn't over. There were more shadows to chase, more injustices to right. As she drove away, Arlington shrinking in her rearview, she knew one thing for certain: the truth always found a way, and she'd be there to guide it into the light.